I'm not Bryce, but I just want to introduce this person real quick. If you guys don't know him, his name is Bryce Baxter. He is a middle school pastor. I was his intern last year. You know, he has some really, really good things to say. Super, super wise person and a great leader. So everybody give it up for Bryce.
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks. That's cool. That's way different than what middle schoolers usually do when you come on the stage, so that's cool. Well, welcome, guys. Like he said, my name is Bryce. If you don't know me, love to meet you. I think I know a lot of you guys in the room from middle school, or at some point probably I met you. But if you guys don't have a Bible, I know you guys do this here, so feel free to go grab one. There's a bunch. The bucket is like used to be over here, but it's just right over here. It's not too far. So grab a Bible if you don't have one. And we are going to be in the book of Matthew today. So you can start flipping there as you would like. I got to find it real quick so I don't lose it. But yeah, we're going to be in Matthew 7. So if you have one, grab it. If you don't have one, there's plenty over there. If you want to take it home and you need a Bible, please take it home. That'd be great. Well, I guess I'll just give you guys a second. That's cool. So let's see. How many days till spring break? Is it 1 week? This is the last week of school before spring break? 5 days. 17 days for Matthew because he doesn't get a break. 17 days for Trey. That's great. Well, I'm excited. Well, if you guys were here last week, then you would already know this, but we jumped into a new series here called The Noble Experiment. Mason kicked it off, and I got to watch it. I wasn't here in person, but if you didn't know this, we have a YouTube, and you can go watch it. So I went and watched it, and it was awesome. So you should go watch it. And then, like, comment, subscribe, whatever, all those things. Send it to your friends because Mason did a great job and it was awesome. So check that out if you missed it. It was cool. But we're kicking off this new series and we're talking about integrity. And Mason kicked it off last week talking about integrity in decisions. And it was great. I loved it. So tonight we're going to keep going on, like I said, in Matthew 7. If you want to find your way there, we'll get to that in a little bit. But before that, I wanted to ask you guys, how many of you in the room would consider yourselves like a rule follower, or maybe not even a rule follower, like someone who likes directions? Like you like when the teachers give you assignments with like clear directions, and it's not just more like, oh, it's creative freedom, do whatever you want. Yeah, you like directions. Okay, that's like half of us. I'd say that's about normal. I think I'm a person who sometimes I really like directions, sometimes I don't. Like in school, when they would tell you to like write a research paper, I wouldn't want to just like have to be assigned something, but it's a lot cooler when you get to pick what you want to write about, or like when they tell you have to read whatever dumb book, it's like, oh, I don't want to read this. This is so stupid. Let me pick a book and I'd actually want to read it. So I kind of like directions, sometimes kind of don't. But why I tell you that is because when I first started working here, I was an intern, much like what Mason does, but I was an intern in the middle school zone. So I would hang out with middle schoolers and do kind of the same thing Mason does, but with middle schoolers. And there was another guy here named Jordan. I think a lot of you guys might know him. He's came and spoke here a few times. I think he's coming to speak here in like 2 weeks, so you've got that to look forward to. But Jordan was the high school intern. I was the middle school intern. And we were both working here together, and it was a great time. And while we were doing that, they were building this building that we're in right now. And so Jordan and I, like 85% of our jobs when they were building this building was just assembling things. Like we probably put this table together at some point, and we would put together ping pong tables, and we put together all the little like stools that you see and the little like high top tables and grills. We put together all kinds of dumb things, right? All the time. That was all our bosses were having us do, was put stuff together, and it was obnoxious. But since we got kind of bored with that after like one table, what we would start doing is we would try and put things together just by opening the box. And those boxes have like 1,000 directions and 100 little screws. And we would just look at the picture and see if we could just make it without the directions. So that was our goal. We would always try and do that. And for a while, I'm pretty sure a lot of stuff just broke around here all the time. And you'd have me and Jordan to thank for that. But it got really boring if you're just following this direction book all the time. So we would just put it together. And one of our goals was always, how many screws can we have left over at the end? We would see how much we could build it without using all the parts. And we did pretty good. And then the grill broke after like 5 months. So I think that was our fault. But I tell you that because that is kind of what we're talking about tonight. This idea of instructions, right? We have instructions sometimes. A lot of us hear instructions about things in life, and we just don't want to follow them because directions are kind of boring sometimes. But we know they can be good for us, right? Someone designed all those little instruction booklets about whatever product it was, whatever ping pong table was. Some little engineer sat in his office for like 6 hours making this instruction booklet, probably Matthew, could have been, he's an engineer, I think. Could have been Matthew. And they made this little instruction booklet so when you put it together, it would work properly. And if you don't follow it, obviously it breaks, and that sucks. But we do the same thing in our lives, right? Sometimes we watch videos about how to do things better in life. You've probably watched like life hack videos on TikTok or like YouTube video on how to get better sleep or what to do when I'm stressed. Or you've heard things at school where they talk about how to manage your stress and how to do these things, how to get better at your sport. Maybe you play basketball or maybe you play the trumpet or something. You've probably watched something about how to get better at things, and these people give you directions, right? We hear things that we know will help us, we just don't apply them. Like all the time, we hear things we know would be good for us, and we just don't apply them in our lives because directions are the worst, right? We seek advice, we seek guidance from people. We all want to get better. We all want to improve in our lives. We wish we were happier people. We want to be healthier. We want to have better relationships. We want to have better friendships. We want to know how to navigate the hard things of life better. We want these things, right? Everybody wants to improve. I don't think any of you would be like, no, I really just don't want to get any better. I don't want to learn how to do these things better. But we see the directions, and then we're like, that doesn't sound so great anymore. It takes a lot of work. Maybe I don't really want to do that, right? We want to improve, but we just don't follow through. We don't follow through very often, right? And the question I think we find ourselves asking all the time is the question we're going to talk about tonight. How do we build a good life? How do we build a good life? That's the question we're getting at a lot of times, whether we know it or not. The deeper question a lot of times is, how do we build a good life? And in this series, we're talking about being noble, which, if you were here last week, Mason defined being noble as being a person of integrity, and integrity is, I think we've got to say, authenticity and good character, right? So if you were here last week, we talked about how integrity is what it means to be noble, and to be a person of integrity means to be a person with authenticity and good character. So you're real and you're a good person. You have good character, you have good character traits. Pretty straightforward idea, right? Pretty simple idea, but really hard to actually live that. So tonight, we're going to talk about the idea that what if living with integrity can help us build a great life? What if living with integrity can help us build a great life? So, like I said, we're going to jump into Matthew 7. So if you haven't got there yet, then you're probably not going to get there. I've given you a while. So we're just going to go for it. So Matthew 7 is the end of the Sermon on the Mount. So this guy named Jesus, if you've ever heard of him, he was an awesome guy, and he lived a long time ago, and these people wrote down all the things that he said while he was here. And the Sermon on the Mount was this big sermon he gave, and I think they preached a message series on this like a couple months ago. I don't know when it was, a few months ago. So if you are like, oh, what's the Sermon on the Mount all about? Go to YouTube, watch Jack and Mason preach all about it for like 4 weeks, and then it'll be great. But we are going to jump in right at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. So Jesus kind of preaches this message, and it's about all kinds of things about how to live a good life following Jesus, right? He talks about being the salt and light of the earth, about not letting worry rule your life, about loving your enemies, about all kinds of stuff. And then he gets to the end, and that's where we're going to read kind of this last little section starting in verse 24, where Jesus is answering this question of how do we build a good life? Jesus is going to try and answer that question here. And he's going to do it with a little analogy, because that's the way he teaches a lot, is he tells little stories to explain a point. And that's what he's going to do here. So we're going to read it. Let's jump in. He says, verse 24, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. That's what we're jumping into tonight. This idea of building these two houses, right? He's talking about building houses, and one of them is built on sand and one of them is built on rock, right? Like brick. It's built on a solid foundation versus sand. And the foundations are really what's important here, right? All things the same. Assume the houses are built the exact same. The only difference is the foundation of the house, right? It's a copy and paste house, just two different foundations. That's what matters, is the foundations. One is sand, right? And sand, I'm sure you all have touched sand at some point in your life, whether it's a sandbox or the beach. Sand is pretty cool. Sand is usually warm. It's soft. It's pretty nice. Usually it's on a beach, which means it's a beach house, which is really cool because who doesn't want to have a beach house? It's really great, right? And it's actually really easy to build on too because it's soft. It's not that hard to put some wooden beams into sand because it's soft. You just kind of knock it in there. And that's probably a lot easier, especially in Jesus' day and age when they didn't have cranes and things like that. It was pretty easy to build on sand. But the issue with the sand is that when the storms come, the sand is just going to go wherever, right? If you've ever seen somebody build a sand castle, and then what happens at night? The tide comes in and it just wipes it out, right? Same idea. When a storm would hit something built on sand, all the foundation is going to scatter. Sand gets taken every which way with the storm. It gets blown around by the wind. It gets taken away with the water. It's not firm, right? It's not going to hold up against a storm. And then you've got the rock, right? The rock is a lot harder to build on. It's going to take a lot more work to build on a rock, especially if you think about like back before they had drills or anything like that. Like how do you drill into rock when you don't have a drill? You got to get like a little hammer and like a little other rock essentially and just kind of like beat it for like hours until you make a little hole in the rock. It's going to take a while to build on a rock. It takes more work to set that up. But once you get that house built on the rock, it's not going anywhere, right? When a rock gets hit by a storm, it still gets hit by the storm. It's still going to get wet. It's still going to get soaked when the downpours come. But what's going to happen is in the morning's going to come, the sun's going to come out, and the water's going to dry up, and that house is still going to be there, right? It's different. It's still going to be there. It's going to be there constantly. It's going to get hit by the storms just the same as a house in the sand would. But what's different is what happens when the storm is gone. When the storm lets up, one house is still there. One house is washed away. And if you haven't caught on, the house represents your life, right? If your life is built in the sand, that means when storms come, it's going to wreck you, right? When the storms of life come, whatever that is for you, maybe it's, depression, loneliness, breakups, whatever it is, family issues, the storms are going to come. You know these things. You know that life's going to get hard. And if your life is built in the sand, it's going to send you into chaos. It's going to wreck you. It's going to send you into emotions all over the place, and you're not going to know what to do. You're going to feel like your whole world is falling apart and crashing in around you because your foundation was on the sand, and you don't have anything to go back to, and it's just falling apart, right? And then we've got the one that's built on the rock, and maybe that took a while to build. It was harder to build, but it's going to make it through the storm. The storm is going to hit. It's still going to get hard. Things are still going to suck sometimes. Life is going to happen, but the rock can get wet and it's going to dry up later. And the rock, when it dries, it's still there. The house is still there and it has a firm foundation. So to build your life on the rock, the next question is, how do we build a life on the rock then, right? If we want to build a good life and that's built on the rock, obviously the next natural question is, what does that look like? How do we build a life on the rock? So we're going to go back to what it says. It says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like the wise man who built on the rock. So it says you have to hear the words of Jesus, right? You have to hear the words of Jesus and put them into practice, to actually put them into practice. That is how we start to build our life on the rock. It doesn't mean that you just show up and hear the words of Jesus. Maybe you just show up to church every now and then and you're like, yeah, I go and I know Jesus. Maybe I go to camps every now and then. Maybe I would like to worship every now and then. But if you're just hearing the words and it's not changing you, it's not doing anything, if maybe you even read your Bible every now and then, but then your life looks totally different, then you're not hearing the words and putting them into practice, right? You're not building on the rock. It's really easy to convince ourselves that we're building on the rock when maybe we're not, when maybe we're actually building on the sand. Because those who are building on the rock hear his word and put it into practice. And I want to talk to the seniors in a room for a minute, because I know you guys have, 40 days left of school? How many days? I know you know. 39. 39 days left of school. That's crazy. That's so exciting. And I've been talking to you guys, and I've been hearing about how you're getting ready for college and doing those things. But I want to tell you that if you have not been building your house, your life on the rock, then you need to take the next 39 days really seriously. You need to take the next 39 days to really focus on this, because every single statistic in the world would tell you that seniors who go to church, right, they study these seniors who call themselves Christians, who are going to church, going to youth group. After they go off to college, between the ages of 18 and 22, only about 30% of them actually stick with their faith. Only about 30% of them actually still would say, yeah, I'm following Jesus. Maybe I go to a church or like a college ministry or something like that. Only 30%. That's not a lot. That means 7 out of the 10 of you wouldn't care about this in 2 years. You wouldn't care about that. And I think the reason is because a lot of those people's lives were built on the sand and not the rock. So if you haven't been building on the rock, take some time now, because I know every time you tell people that, they're like, oh, yeah, that's not going to happen to us. But I bet if you talk to the different adults in the room and they thought back to when they were in high school, they could be like, oh, yeah, that's pretty true. About 3 out of every 10 stay with it, right? That's sad. You don't want that to be you. So take these next 39 days and actually focus on this. And that's not just for them, that's for all of us, right? We all need to learn to be doers of the word. We need to learn to be doers of the word to actually build our lives. If we want a good life, that's what we all say we want. We all want a good life. How do we do it? We need to learn to be doers of the word. Because life's going to hit you, right? Those storms are going to come. Whether or not you want them to, they're going to keep coming. Sometimes you're like, you know what? It's been a pretty good season. Feel like things have been going pretty well. Something's going to come up. Something is going to hit again. It's going to happen. And I don't think I have to convince you guys of this. I think you guys all have experienced this at some point in your life. You know things get hard. You know things happen with your family. You know you're going to get dumped every now and then. You know these things are going to happen, right? But people of integrity, when life hits them, they turn to what they know Jesus has told them to do. When people of integrity get hit with these storms and they're built on the rock, it looks different than when someone built on the sand does. Because when the people of integrity do that, they turn to what Jesus has told them. They turn to, okay, I know Jesus says to praise him whether I'm going through the valley or the mountaintop, right? They know those things. They know that they should praise Jesus. They know, okay, I need to lean into my friend group right now because I'm going through a really hard time and I need some help from my other fellow believers. I know that's what Jesus wants me to do. I know that it's going to be hard, but I know that I can lean into him. And instead of a lot of us, if we're built on the sand, and this is, I know this because this is what I used to do. When you're built on the sand and the storms come, you turn to everything else in the world. You turn to everything else the world has to offer to help you with the storm, to drugs, to alcohol, to porn, to bad friends, to whatever your vice is. That's what you turn to. Maybe for some of you, it's like, oh, when things get hard, I just shut down. I just shut everybody out. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't let anyone in. I don't want to have to deal with these emotions that I'm feeling. So I'm just going to shut down, right? That's what the sand looks like. If I'm describing that and you're like, dang, that's what I do when the storms hit, then maybe you're built on the sand. And maybe it's time to ask if you want to start building on the rock of Jesus, right? Last week, Mason talked a lot about decisions, right? He talked about the decisions we're making and how to make integrity in decision, or how to use integrity to make decisions. And that was really a big part of the authenticity piece of that integrity formula, right? To make decisions with authenticity, to live the way you say you're going to live. And this week, we're kind of talking about that good character piece a little bit. We're talking about when we are practicing the words of Jesus, we are exhibiting good character, right? When you practice the things Jesus says, that's what exhibiting good character is, right? Building our lives on that solid foundation of what Jesus teaches us about. Another way to say that would be integrity follows what Jesus says is best, right? Integrity follows what Jesus says is best. So if you want to be a person of integrity, you're going to follow what Jesus says is best, right? It's a simple idea. Again, it's another one of those things that's like really like simple to like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I can understand that, but really hard to live out, right? It's really hard to live this out because we live in a crazy world where we don't like to always follow directions. It seems more fun to not do those kind of things. We want to do what we want to do, right? But what does it mean to do this? To how do we actually follow this, right? So the Sermon on the Mount, if you've never heard of it, we just read the end of it, right? The whole first part of it is full of all these things that are good directions, good things. It talks about how to store up your treasures in heaven instead of on earth, how to ask and seek God, how to go through not to go through the narrow and wide gates, but follow Jesus's path, which is harder to find, right? It talks about all kinds of things full of good directions, and I'm going to leave those for you to go and read more on your own or to go back and watch the other sermon. And we're going to actually go for like a little summarized version of what Jesus says is most important. So we're going to flip a few pages in the Bible to Matthew 22. So it's really not that far. It's like, it took me like, 6 flips maybe. Matthew 22, okay? That's where we're going to go now. And the cool thing about this next passage we're going to go into is Jack and Mason did another sermon series on this passage more recently, I think, a couple weeks ago. It's called The Greatest Commandment, I think was the name of their series. And if you want to watch that, YouTube, again, great place, got all the things. But we're going to check this out together because Jesus really summarizes this whole idea of how do we do, what does he want, what are the directions we're supposed to follow, right? So we're going to check it out, Matthew 22, verses 36 through 40. Basically, this guy comes up to Jesus and he's like, hey, what is the most important commandment? He's like, I know you say a lot of things in the Bible. What's the most important commandment of all of them? And this is what Jesus replies. He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Did you get that last part? He says all the law and all the prophets hang on these two commandments. What that means, because it's kind of like, that's like a weird line. But what he's saying is everything in Scripture, all the law and the prophets, that's what they say to reference like the whole Bible. Everything that God has ever taught through all these different stories and through all these different experiences the Israelites had and through all that, everything can be summed up into these two commandments. Love God and love people. And I think that the second one is kind of like has like a 2B on there because it says love your neighbor as yourself, which implies you have to love yourself too. So it's kind of like 3 commandments, but it's 2, but there's like a 2B, right? You got to love yourself to love other people. So love God, love people. That's it, right? That's how simple it is. Another one of those things. Really simple, hard to actually live. Really simple idea though. Just love God and love yourself. And it almost sounds too simple because it's like, it seems like it would be too simple of an idea for how to live a good life to just do those 2 things. That sounds like it's a really oversimplification. But what if it's true? What if that's actually true? What if that's all it really takes is just loving God and loving people? And what that means is that you're actually going to have to think sometimes. And you're going to have to think when you're in a situation, okay, what should I do in this situation? How would I love God in this situation, right? What would loving God look like at school? What would that look like? You're going to have to actually think about those things. And, it's easy to say like, oh, I'm going to love God and love people. But then you meet people and people kind of suck. I don't know if you've met people, but they're annoying. They're trying to get on your nerves sometimes. Sometimes they're mean. Sometimes they're just the worst, right? People are rough. So how do I love people in those moments when people are annoying me, when people are frustrating me, when people are being rude to me, when people are being mean to my friends? How do I love people in those moments? You have to actually think through those things. How do I do that? Because it's really simple idea, right? It's really easy to say, yeah, I'm going to love God and love people. But are you actually doing that? Are you actually loving God in your relationships with your girlfriend, with your boyfriend? Are you actually loving God? Are you actually being loving to them? Are you having those conversations about that, about what that looks like in that spot, right? Because it's easy to say you are, but are you actually doers of his word, right? That's how you start to build your life on the rock. So I want to give you guys a couple of ideas to kind of get started with this, kind of as we're closing up here. 3 ideas, right? Number 1, how do we get started? Start simple, right? You don't have to make the craziest decisions every day to start doing this, right? Not every decision you make is a life-changing decision, but every decision you make, if you make it with integrity, can start changing your life, right? If you can start making consistent decisions with integrity, like Mason kind of talked about last week, that can start to change your life, right? Start simple. Think about, okay, how can I love God today? What's one way I can love God today? Really simple, right? That's you starting to build your life on the rock instead of the sand. Super simple things like that. Maybe it's like, okay, I'm just going to take 5 minutes to just pray to God today, and that's my way to love him. Or I'm just not going to be mean to that kid at school that I don't like today. Whatever it is, start with the small things. Start simple. Get the ball rolling, and then it'll get easier. Number 2, check what you're building on, right? This would be big for a lot of us. Just check what you're building on. Think about it in your life. Are you building on the sand or are you building on the rock? You're building on one of the two. And the thing is, some days we build on the sand, some days we build on the rock. It's not necessarily like, oh, I'm always building on the rock or I'm always building on the sand. It's a slow process of learning what it looks like to build on the rock every day. And you're going to have days where you've been building on the rock and then you're like, oh, I did not do that today. I was not a doer of his word. I did not follow what he says. And that's okay. But just have an honest conversation with yourself of what are you doing? Don't fool yourself into thinking you're building on the rock if you're not, because you're only going to hurt yourself, because you're going to think you're built on the rock and those storms are going to come and your life's going to go back into chaos and you're not going to know what to do and you're going to feel lost again. So don't bother fooling yourself into that. But ask yourself, am I building around following what Jesus says or following what the world says? And number 3, do what you know is right. The reality is you guys are all really smart people. I know a lot of you in here, and I know you're smart, and I know you've probably only gotten smarter since I knew you in middle school. So you know what's right. I'd say like 80% of the time, you probably know what's right. You might not always, and that's okay. We don't have to know everything. But a lot of times, we know what the right thing to do is. We know what we should do, but we don't actually do it, right? We learn these things, like I talked about at the beginning. We learn things, but we don't apply them, right? We don't apply them to our lives. We know what the right thing to do is. And what if walking in integrity is just doing those things? What if it's just doing those little steps that we already know would be good for us? We already know this is the right thing to do. What if we just actually did them? Because that's the hard part. It's not hard to know what to do. It's hard to actually do it. That's where the trick comes in, right? And that's how you start to actually build your life on that. And if you're struggling right now, I know a lot of us probably in the room are probably in some kind of a storm right now. And you feel like, well, it's too late. I'm already on the sand. My life is in chaos. Jesus is there and he wants to pull you out, right? If you've heard the story of Peter, when Jesus sees Peter start falling into the water, he picks him up and he pulls him out of the water. And that's where Jesus wants to do with you if you're in this storm right now. He wants to pull you out. He wants to dust you off, to help you dry off. And then he wants you to start building on the rock tomorrow. He wants you to take one step tomorrow to start building on the rock. Because imagine what your life could start to look like if you actually were building on a firm foundation. If every time a storm hit you in your life, it didn't send you into a state of chaos where you felt like the world is falling apart and you don't know what to do and you feel like you're having this crisis of identity or this crisis of you just like everything is over, the sky is falling. If that didn't happen when these storms came because you were built on the firm foundation, you turned to Jesus in your times that are struggle. It doesn't mean the hard times won't come. They're still going to come. It's just about how you respond in those moments. Because imagine if a group of us in here were to actually start living this way, to actually start walking in integrity and to start doing these things, right? If people looked at you and they said, yeah, those are people who they know what's right and they do it. They love God and they love people. They do that every single day. People would take note of that. There's probably like 80 of you in the room. If every one of us was known for loving God and loving people, that would make a difference. That brings hope to a group of people. That brings hope to a school or a team or wherever you are going in your everyday life. That brings hope. And that is what we are all about. We want to be a place that brings hope. We want to be a place where people come and they walk in the doors and they see hope on the faces of you guys because you are people who love God and love people. That's my prayer for each and every one of us. We're going to jump into some worship again here, and I pray that you guys just spend some time thinking about that, having an honest conversation with yourself of where am I? Am I building on the rock or am I building on the sand? And what should I do next? What should I do next? What's one thing I could start simple with? So let's pray, and then we're going to get into some worship. Dear Lord, thank you for this night. Thank you for all the students in the room. I'm so grateful that each and every one of them chose to spend their Sunday night here. I'm so grateful, God, that you are a gracious God and that you know that it's hard for us to build on the rock. It's hard for us to do what you've told us to do. It's hard to love people and to love you sometimes. We struggle with it, but you're a gracious God, and you said, come on, let's keep trying. It's a new day. Keep trying. Keep working on it. Keep learning to love. We pray all these things, and everybody said,
something isn't adding up. This wild exchange you offer us, but it be my words you gave your blood. Seems hard to believe. You're telling me you chose the cross. You're telling me I'm worth that much. Well, if that's the measure of your love, how else would I see? But completely, deeply, sold out, sincerely, badly. at your fingertips, but on the cross you remain. Oh, I can't repay that kind of love, but I can praise with everything I've got. Since death had all this power on, then just like the grave, oh, I'm completely, deeply, sold out, sincerely abandoned. Oh, I'm completely, freely, hands to the ceiling, enamored. And my one life endeavor to match your surrender, to mirror none, my will be yours. Oh, I'm completely, deeply, don't care who sees me abandoned. Oh, I surrender all. I surrender all. Oh, I surrender all. The whole of my heart, the best of my soul, each phase of my life, each breath in my lungs, consider it yours, Lord. Consider it yours, Lord. The failures I hide, the victories I don't, the battles I fight, each crown that I hoard, consider it yours, Lord. Consider it yours, Lord. All the glory forever, the grave that you won, the praise of the heavens, the kingdom to come. Consider it yours, Lord. Consider it yours, Lord. And I'm completely, deeply, sold out, sincerely abandoned. Oh, and I'm completely, freely, hands to the ceiling, enamored. Oh, and my one life endeavor to match your surrender, to mirror none, my will be yours. Oh, I'm completely, deeply, don't care who sees me abandoned. Oh, I surrender all. I surrender all. I surrender all. And here I am, down on my knees again, surrendering all, surrendering all. Find me here, Lord, as you draw me near. I'm desperate for you, so desperate for you, and I surrender. Stretch my soul, His mercy and grace unfold. I hunger and thirst. I surrender. I surrender. I want to know you more. I want to know you more. Yes, I surrender. I surrender. I want to know you more. I want to know you more.
Would you guys pray with me real quick? Heavenly Father, God, thank you so much for the message that Bryce gave, Lord. God, I just think of all the times in my life where I thought I was building on the strong foundation, but I really wasn't. And I had to come to a decision in my life where I had to realize, Lord, that I was not building my life on you. And I pray that if there is anybody here today, Lord, that they are realizing that maybe they are building their house on the sand, God, that you would convict them and reveal that to them, and that you would give them the courage and the boldness to be able to admit that and to talk to somebody about that and to say, I want to build my life on the solid rock, on you, Jesus. In your heavenly name we pray, amen. I just want to say one thing. In the last two sermons, so the sermon last week and the sermon this week, the application point, one of them was the same exact thing. Do what's right. You know, the reality is, like, I think me and Bryce kind of said something about this a few days ago, but if you were able to take all the things you learned just last year and this year decide not to learn anything new, but just apply those things that you learned last year, you're going to grow so much more than you ever have. So just this week, do what you know is right. And trust your instincts and do the right thing. So I just want to encourage you guys in that. And also one more thing. The statistic of 30% of people who graduate high school end up not being a part of church or falling away from the faith. Don't be a statistic. You know, and the way that you beat that statistic is to build the foundation right now, to dive into community, to the people around you, to be vulnerable, to share the things that you're going through. And when you feel like you're falling away, talk to those people. So do those things. We have small groups on Wednesday night, 6:30, same time. Next year, Sunday night, we'd love to see you guys. Thanks for coming. You are loved and prayed for, and you are accepted here just as you are. Go in peace and serve the Lord.